Before we delve into the meat of the story, let me introduce myself. My name is Chris, and this story is about my journey with my now wife, Jane. It's a tale that might seem unconventional to some, but it's a crucial part of our relationship history. We met in college, where I was immediately drawn to her outgoing and adventurous spirit. Jane was the type of person who could light up any room she walked into, and she had a confidence that was incredibly attractive. Our relationship started out like any other. We went on dates, spent time getting to know each other's families, and enjoyed the thrill of young love. As we grew closer, I found myself becoming more comfortable sharing my deepest desires and fantasies with her. One evening, while we were cuddled up on the couch, I hesitantly brought up the idea of her sleeping with other men. At first, Jane was taken aback. She didn't understand why I would suggest something like that, and she was worried it meant I wanted to be with other women. I assured her that wasn't the case. My interest was purely in her experiencing pleasure with other men, while I remained faithful to her. Despite her initial rejection, I didn't give up on the idea. I started subtly introducing it into our conversations and during our intimate moments. I would ask her about her past experiences, the guys she had been with before me, and whether she ever thought about them. Sometimes, I would mention their names while we were being intimate, trying to gauge her reaction. Jane would play along occasionally, but more often than not, she would push back, clearly uncomfortable with the idea once the moment had passed. Still, I continued to gently nudge her towards the lifestyle I envisioned for us. Jane has always been a bit of a social media butterfly. She loves posting pictures, sharing updates, and engaging with friends online. I decided to use this to my advantage. I began liking pictures of other guys on her Facebook, particularly those who she had mentioned in passing, or who had a habit of texting her when they were drunk. This went on for a few months, and while Jane found it odd, she didn't make a big deal out of it. It was just another part of our evolving relationship dynamic. It was a warm summer night, and Jane had come home from a night out with friends. She had a few too many drinks and stumbled through the door, her laughter filling the room. I helped her to bed, where she quickly passed out. As I sat next to her, watching her sleep, my mind wandered back to the topic that had been on my mind for months now: her interactions with other men. I had been nudging her towards the cuckold lifestyle, and while she had started to entertain the idea during our intimate moments, I knew there was more to it than she was letting on. After a while, I couldn't resist the temptation. I picked up Jane's phone from the nightstand and unlocked it. My heart was pounding in my chest as I navigated to her messages. I knew I was crossing a line, but curiosity got the best of me. I started scrolling through her conversations, and what I found left me both excited and anxious. The first thread I opened was with a guy named Mike. Mike was an old college friend of Jane's, who had recently moved back to town. Their messages started off innocently enough, with Mike asking how she had been and what she had been up to. But as I scrolled further, the tone of the conversation changed. Mike: I miss those college days. Remember that time we hooked up at that party? Jane: LOL, yeah, those were wild times. You were always so much fun. Mike: I still think about that night sometimes. You were amazing. Jane: Haha, thanks. You're not too bad yourself. The flirtation was evident, and I could feel my pulse quicken. I continued reading, and the messages grew more explicit. Mike: Do you ever think about doing it again? Jane: Sometimes. What about you? Mike: All the time. I bet you're still just as hot. Jane: Maybe even hotter. Mike: Prove it. Send me a pic. My heart skipped a beat as I read Jane's response. Jane: All right, but only if you promise not to show anyone. There was a pause in the conversation, and then a picture appeared. Jane had sent him a selfie, her shirt pulled up to reveal her bra. It was a sexy, teasing photo, and Mike's response was immediate. Mike: Damn, Jane, you look incredible. Jane: Thanks. I sat back, absorbing what I'd just read. Jane was flirting with Mike, sending him suggestive pictures. It was thrilling and nerve-wracking at the same time. I moved on to the next conversation, this one with a guy named Ryan. Ryan was someone she had met at a bar a few months ago, and their messages were even more explicit. Ryan: Hey, beautiful. What are you up to tonight? Jane: Just got home. Had a few drinks with friends. Ryan: Wish I could have been there. Would have loved to see you all dressed up. Jane: You would have liked my outfit tonight. Ryan: Yeah? What were you wearing? Jane: A little black dress. It was pretty revealing. Ryan: You know how to drive a guy crazy. Did you get a lot of attention? Jane. A bit, but I kept thinking about you. Ryan. Really? What were you thinking? Jane. How much I wanted you to take that dress off me. Ryan. God, Jane, you're making me hard just thinking about it. Jane. Good. I like knowing I have that effect on you. Their conversation continued in this vein, each message more provocative than the last. I was torn between feeling betrayed and incredibly turned on. Jane was clearly enjoying the attention and the power she had over these men. As I read on, I found myself getting aroused by the idea of her being desired by other guys. I moved to the next conversation, this one with a guy named Alex. Alex was a friend from her gym, and their messages were a mix of casual chat and intense flirtation. Alex. Great workout today. You were killing it on the treadmill. Jane. Thanks. You weren't too bad yourself. Alex. You always motivate me to push harder. Jane. Glad I can help. Alex. Maybe we should work out together more often. Jane. I'd like that. Maybe we can do more than just work out. Alex. Is that an invitation? Jane. What do you think? Alex. I think I need to see you out of those gym clothes. Jane. Maybe next time we work out, I'll give you a sneak peek. The messages with Alex were playful, but loaded with sexual tension. It was clear that Jane enjoyed the flirtation and the idea of being pursued by these men. I couldn't help but feel a mix of jealousy and excitement as I read their exchanges. The final conversation I opened was with a guy named Tom. Tom was someone Jane had known for a long time, and their messages were the most explicit of all. Tom. Hey, sexy. What are you wearing right now? Jane. Just got out of the shower, wrapped in a towel. Tom. Wish I could be there to take it off you. Jane. Maybe you can. What are you doing tomorrow night? Tom. Nothing planned. Want to meet up? Jane. I'd like that. Maybe we can pick up where we left off last time. Tom. You mean when I had you screaming my name? Jane. Exactly. I've been thinking about it ever since. Tom. God, Jane, you're going to make me lose control. Jane. Good. I want you to. Their messages were filled with explicit details of their past encounters and plans for future ones. It was clear that Jane and Tom had a strong sexual connection, and they weren't shy about expressing it. As I sat there reading through these messages, I felt a whirlwind of emotions. On one hand, I was jealous and hurt that Jane was engaging with these men behind my back. On the other hand, I was incredibly turned on by the idea of her being desired and pursued by other guys. It was a complicated mix of feelings that I didn't quite know how to process. The next morning, I confronted Jane about what I had found. She was furious that I had gone through her phone, but as we talked, our anger subsided. I told her that while I didn't like being kept in the dark, I found the idea of her being with other men incredibly arousing. We had a long, honest conversation about our desires and boundaries. Jane admitted that she enjoyed the attention and the thrill of flirting with other guys, but she was worried about how it would affect our relationship. We decided to set some ground rules moving forward. Jane would be open about her interactions with other men, and I would be involved in the process. This was supposed to be something we both enjoyed together, not something that created secrets and resentment between us. Over the next few months, Jane's flirtations continued, but now they were out in the open. She would show me her messages with other guys, and we would talk about them together. It became a part of our intimate life, a way to spice things up and explore our fantasies. Jane would tell me about her conversations and show me the pictures she sent, and I found myself getting more and more aroused by the idea of her being with other men. One evening, Jane came home from another night out with friends. She was tipsy, but not as drunk as before. We sat down together and she pulled out her phone. I want to show you something, she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. I took the phone from her and opened the message thread she had pulled up. It was with a guy named Josh, someone she had met at a party a few weeks ago. Their conversation was even more explicit than the ones I had read before. Josh. Hey, gorgeous. What are you up to tonight? Jane. Just got home. Had a few drinks with friends. Josh. Wish I could have been there. Would have loved to see you all dressed up. Jane. You would have liked my outfit tonight. Josh. Yeah? What were you wearing? Jane. A little black dress. It was pretty revealing. Josh. God, I wish I could have seen that. Bet you looked amazing. Jane. I did get a lot of attention, but I kept thinking about you. Josh. Really? What were you thinking? Jane. how much I wanted you to take that dress off me. Josh, damn, Jane, you're making me hard just thinking about it. Jane, good. I like knowing I have that effect on you. Josh, you definitely do. Send me a pic? Jane had sent him a picture of herself in the dress, her smile coy and seductive. Josh's response was immediate. Josh, holy shit, Jane, you look incredible. Jane, thanks. The conversation continued, growing more explicit with each message. Josh, I can't stop thinking about you. What would you do if I was there right now? Jane, I'd let you take off my dress, then I'd let you do whatever you wanted. Josh, God, I wish I was there. I want to touch you so badly. Jane, I want that too. Maybe next time we can make it happen. In an effort to push Jane further towards the lifestyle, I made some changes in our relationship. I stopped being as physically affectionate, only giving her half-hearted attempts at intimacy. I also became more submissive, knowing that she didn't particularly enjoy being the dominant one. We started spending less time together around the house. This distance created a sense of longing and curiosity in Jane, which I hoped would lead her to explore her desires with other men. About a month later, I picked up Jane's phone again and found that she was still texting one of the guys very sexually. This time, I felt uncomfortable and asked her to stop. She agreed, but her actions didn't fully align with her words. Their flirty exchanges continued, and she even started sending him suggestive pictures. This went on for another 5 months until one night, while drunk, Jane let it slip to her friends that she had been sleeping with this guy. Her friends were shocked, as they had no idea about our lifestyle. Jane apologized to me the next day, admitting she had been sleeping with him. I had a choice. I could get angry and shut down the lifestyle or embrace it and let it continue. I chose the latter, telling her that while I didn't like being kept in the dark, I was okay with her continuing as long as I knew about it. For the next 3 months, Jane would inform me when she was going to meet up with the guy. She would come home and tell me all the details about their encounters. This was a thrilling time for both of us. Jane was enjoying herself, and I was living out my fantasy. However, things took a turn when she started developing feelings for him. He too had strong feelings for her, and Jane found herself torn between the two of us. This went on until the guy got a girlfriend, which, in a way, saved our relationship from further complications. Fast forward a year, and Jane and I decided to get married. The past year had been filled with flirtations at bars and some approved suggestive pictures sent to other guys, but the physical side of our lifestyle had died down. As we settled into married life, I found myself wanting to push the boundaries again. Jane was also getting more into it, often calling me by the names of other men during our intimate moments and flirting with guys on social media. Things escalated when I started liking pictures of a particular guy on her Facebook. They ended up going to dinner together, and although Jane said her friend would be joining them, she never showed up. Jane texted me, asking if she could sleep with him that night. I agreed, and they did. It was a bit awkward for me since I knew the guy, but Jane was fully immersed in the lifestyle now. She began sending nudes to multiple guys and enjoyed being dominant in the bedroom, telling me who she was going to sleep with next. This newfound dominance led to complications when Jane started flirting with a guy I truly didn't like. I asked her to stop, but she knew how to manipulate me. During sex, she would call me by his name and send him suggestive pictures. This was the beginning of my regret. I begged her not to do anything with him, but she continued to flirt. Thankfully, the distance between us and him living 3 hours away prevented them from actually meeting up. However, the emotional strain was enough to push us to the brink. When Jane and I decided to take a break, it felt like my world was crashing down around me. The weeks leading up to it had been a roller coaster of emotions. Our relationship, once a source of joy and excitement, had become a tangled mess of jealousy, anger, and mistrust. Jane's flirtations had escalated to a point where it was no longer something I could handle, and her interactions with the guy I truly disliked had pushed me to my breaking point. The decision to take a break was mutual, but it was Jane who initiated it. We were sitting in the living room, the silence between us heavy and uncomfortable. She looked at me with a mix of sadness and determination. "I think we need some time apart," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, trying to keep my emotions in check. "Maybe you're right." We agreed that we would still live in the same house but lead separate lives. We would sleep in different rooms, avoid spending time together, and take this time to figure out what we really wanted. It was a trial separation, but it felt like the end. The first night of our break was unbearable. I lay in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with thoughts of Jane. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think about anything other than the fact that my marriage was falling apart. The house felt empty and cold, the silence deafening. I could hear Jane moving around in our bedroom, and every sound was a reminder of the distance that had grown between us. In the days that followed, I threw myself into work, trying to distract myself from the pain. I spent long hours at the office, avoiding going home until late at night. When I did come home, I went straight to the guest room, not wanting to see Jane. It was a miserable existence, and I felt like a ghost in my own life. Our interactions were minimal and strained. We would pass each other in the hallway, exchange awkward pleasantries, and then retreat to our separate spaces. It was like living with a stranger. The only time we really communicated was during our therapy sessions. Couples therapy was supposed to help us navigate this difficult time, but it often felt like a battleground. Our therapist, Dr. Lang, was a kind and patient woman who tried her best to mediate our sessions, but there was so much anger and hurt between us that it was hard to make any progress. Jane would sit on one side of the room, her arms crossed, a look of defiance on her face, while I sat on the other, feeling like a broken man. One session in particular stands out in my memory. We were discussing the events that had led to our break, and Jane's involvement with the guy I despised came up. "I don't understand why you kept talking to him," I said, my voice trembling with frustration. "You knew how much it hurt me." Jane sighed, looking exasperated. "I told you it was just flirting. It didn't mean anything." "Didn't mean anything?" I shot back, my anger bubbling to the surface. "You sent him pictures. You called him when I was lying right next to you. How can you say it didn't mean anything?" Dr. Lang intervened, her voice calm and soothing. "Chris, let's try to focus on how this made you feel. Jane, can you acknowledge his feelings?" Jane rolled her eyes but reluctantly nodded. "Fine. I'm sorry, okay? I didn't realize how much it was hurting you." It was a hollow apology, and we both knew it. The session ended with more unresolved issues than when we started, and I left feeling even more despondent. As the days turned into weeks, the situation only grew worse. Jane started going out more, spending nights at friends' houses or staying out late. I tried not to let it bother me, but every time she left, I couldn't help but wonder if she was seeing someone else. The thought gnawed at me, eating away at what little sanity I had left. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to confront her when she came home. It was well past midnight when I heard the front door open and Jane's footsteps in the hallway. I got up from the bed and walked out to meet her. "Jane, we need to talk," I said, my voice firm. She looked at me, surprised and a little annoyed. "Can it wait until morning? I'm tired." "No, it can't," I insisted. "Where have you been?" "Out with friends," she replied, her tone defensive. "Who? And don't lie to me." Jane sighed, rubbing her temples. "God, Chris, why do you care? We're on a break, remember?" "That doesn't mean you can do whatever you want," I snapped. "We're still married, Jane. This isn't just about you." She glared at me, her eyes filled with anger. "You know what? I'm done with this. I'm done with you trying to control me. If you can't handle it, then maybe we shouldn't even be together." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stood there stunned as she walked past me and into her room, slamming the door behind her. I felt a mix of rage and despair, unsure of what to do next. The next day, I called Dr. Lang and scheduled an emergency session. I needed to talk to someone, to make sense of the chaos that my life had become. When I arrived at her office, she welcomed me with a sympathetic smile. "Chris, it's good to see you. How are you holding up?" I sighed, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. "Not great, honestly. I feel like I'm losing her, and I don't know what to do." Dr. Lang nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Taking a break can be incredibly difficult. It's important to remember that this time apart is meant to help both of you figure out what you truly want. But it's also important to communicate your needs and feelings." "I've tried," I said, feeling frustrated. "But it always ends in a fight. She doesn't seem to care about how I feel." "Sometimes people react defensively when they're feeling overwhelmed," Dr. Lang explained. "It's possible that Jane is struggling with her own emotions and isn't sure how to express them. Have you considered writing her a letter? It might help you communicate your feelings without the immediate tension of a face-to-face conversation. It was an idea worth considering. That night, I sat down and poured my heart out onto the page. I wrote about my love for her, my fears, my frustrations, and my hopes for our future. It was a cathartic experience, and when I was done, I felt a small sense of relief. The next morning, I left the letter on her nightstand and went to work. All day, I couldn't stop thinking about how she would react. When I came home that evening, Jane was sitting on the couch, the letter in her hand. Her eyes were red and puffy, and she looked up at me with a mixture of sadness and regret. "Chris, I read your letter," she said softly. "I'm sorry for everything. I know I've hurt you, and I hate that I've done that." I sat down next to her, feeling a glimmer of hope. "Jane, I love you. I just want us to find a way to make this work." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I love you too. I don't want to lose you." For the first time in weeks, we held each other and cried. It was a moment of vulnerability and connection that we had been missing. We talked late into the night, opening up about our fears and insecurities. It was a small step towards healing, but it was a step nonetheless. In the weeks that followed, things began to slowly improve. We continued with therapy, but the sessions were more productive. We both made an effort to communicate better and to be more understanding of each other's feelings. The break was still in effect, but there was a sense of hope that hadn't been there before. However, it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were still moments of tension and misunderstanding. One night, I came home to find Jane FaceTiming the guy she had been flirting with. She was lying in bed, laughing and chatting with him as if nothing had changed. "Jane, what the hell?" I exclaimed, my anger flaring up again. She looked at me, startled. "Chris, it's just a conversation. We're on a break, remember?" "That doesn't mean you can just do whatever you want," I said, my voice shaking. "This is exactly what we've been trying to work through." She sighed, looking exasperated. "I need to have friends, Chris. You can't expect me to just sit here and do nothing." "Friends?" I scoffed. "You know damn well it's more than that." We argued for hours, rehashing the same points over and over. It was exhausting, and by the end of it, we were both drained. Jane retreated to her room, and I went to mine, feeling defeated. The next day during our therapy session, we brought up the incident. Dr. Lang listened patiently as we both vented our frustrations. "Jane, do you understand why Chris is upset?" she asked gently. Jane nodded, looking contrite. "Yes, I do. I don't know how to balance everything. I feel like I'm being pulled in so many directions." "That's understandable," Dr. Lang said. "It's important for both of you to set clear boundaries and communicate your needs. Chris, what do you need from Jane to feel more secure in this situation?" "I need her to be honest with me," I replied. "And I need to know that she's not going behind my back." Jane looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. "I can do that. I'm sorry for making you feel like this." It was a breakthrough, and we left the session feeling more connected than we had in a long time. We continued to work on our relationship, slowly rebuilding the trust that had been shattered. As the break drew to a close, we both knew that we had a long way to go, but there was a renewed sense of commitment. We decided to move back into the same room and focus on rebuilding our marriage. It wasn't easy, but we were determined to make it work. The first night back in the same bed was awkward and tense. We lay there side by side, unsure of how to navigate this new territory. But as the days passed, we began to find our rhythm again. We talked more, laughed more, and rediscovered the love that had brought us together in the first place. It took time, patience, and a lot of effort, but slowly, we began to heal. The wounds were still there, but they were starting to close. We continued with therapy, working through our issues and finding new ways to communicate and connect. Looking back, that break was one of the hardest things I've ever gone through. It was a time of immense pain and uncertainty, but it was also a time of growth and introspection. It forced us to confront our issues head-on and find a way to move forward together. In the end, it brought us closer and made us stronger. We emerged from it with a deeper understanding of each other and a renewed commitment to our marriage. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. And as we moved forward, we knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. The break in our marriage was about 3 years ago. I'm not sure what changed, but Jane eventually came around. She cut off all communication with the guy and sincerely apologized. We went through extensive couples therapy and managed to rebuild our relationship. For the past 3 years, there's been no mention of the cuckold lifestyle. Jane is still dominant in bed, and I've come to enjoy that aspect, but nothing beyond that. A couple of nights ago, something unexpected happened. Jane and I had been out with friends, celebrating a mutual friend's birthday. It was one of those rare evenings where everything felt perfect, great company, delicious food, and a night that seemed to stretch on forever. By the time we got home, we were both high on the fun of the evening and slightly tipsy. We stumbled through the front door, laughing and leaning on each other for support. The house felt warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the cold distance that had defined our relationship during the break. Jane kicked off her heels and headed for the kitchen, grabbing a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. I followed her, my heart light with a sense of optimism I hadn't felt in years. We settled on the couch, sipping our wine and reminiscing about the night. The conversation flowed effortlessly, filled with laughter and shared memories. It was as if the weight of the past few years had lifted, and we were once again the carefree couple who had fallen in love so long ago. As the evening wore on, the mood shifted. The laughter gave way to a comfortable silence, the kind that comes from years of knowing each other intimately. Jane looked at me, her eyes sparkling with mischief, and something deeper, something more intense. "Chris," she said softly, "do you remember the early days? When we used to talk about all our wild fantasies?" I nodded, my pulse quickening. "Of course I do. Those were some of our best conversations." She leaned closer, her breath warm against my ear. "I've been thinking about some of those fantasies lately." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. "Which ones?" Jane's smile was both seductive and sincere. "The ones where we explored new things together. The ones where we pushed boundaries." Her words hung in the air, charged with electricity. We hadn't talked about the cuckold lifestyle since our break, and I wasn't sure if we were ready to revisit that part of our past. But something in her eyes told me that this was different. "We said we wouldn't go down that road again," I reminded her gently, though my resolve was weakening. "I know," she said, her fingers lightly tracing the rim of her wine glass, "but maybe we can explore other fantasies, ones that bring us closer instead of pushing us apart." I looked at her, my heart swelling with love and longing. "What did you have in mind?" Jane leaned back, her eyes never leaving mine. "Remember when we used to role play? Pretend to be different people, in different situations?" A slow smile spread across my face. "I remember. Those were some of our most exciting nights." "Exactly," she said, her voice tinged with excitement. "Why don't we try that again? No pressure, no expectations, just us, having fun and being adventurous together." The idea was tempting, and I felt a rush of anticipation. "I'd like that," I said, my voice low and earnest. "I'd like that a lot." We spent the rest of the night planning our next adventure, laughing and teasing each other as we came up with different scenarios. It felt good to be so connected, to be partners in every sense of the word. By the time we went to bed, the air between us was charged with anticipation. The next evening, we decided to dive into our new adventure. Jane had chosen a scenario where she was a seductive stranger at a bar, and I was a lonely traveler passing through town. We dressed the part, Jane in a sleek, form-fitting dress, and me in a casual but stylish outfit. We met in our living room, which we had transformed into a cozy bar. The lights were dim and soft music played in the background. Jane was sitting at the makeshift bar, nursing a drink, and looking absolutely stunning. I walked in feeling a thrill of excitement. "Mind if I join you?" I asked, slipping into character. Jane looked up, her eyes twinkling. "Sure, stranger. What brings you here?" We played our roles with enthusiasm, the conversation flowing naturally as we flirted and bantered. It was exhilarating to see Jane in this new light, to experience the thrill of seduction and the anticipation of the unknown. As the night progressed, the boundaries between our roles and our true selves blurred. We were caught up in the moment, lost in the excitement of our game. When we finally came together, it was with a passion that took my breath away. It was as if we were rediscovering each other, falling in love all over again. In the aftermath, as we lay tangled in each other's arms, I felt a profound sense of contentment. This was what we had been missing: the connection, the excitement, the shared adventure. It was a reminder that our relationship was not defined by the past, but by the present and the future we were building together. Jane looked at me, her expression soft and loving. Thank you for tonight, Chris. I needed this. I did too, I admitted, kissing her gently. I love you, Jane. More than anything. I love you too, she whispered, her eyes shining with emotion. And I promise, we'll keep exploring together. No more secrets, no more lies, just us, being honest and open with each other. It was a promise that filled me with hope. We had been through so much, but we had emerged stronger and more united. As I held Jane close, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Our love was resilient, and as long as we had each other, there was nothing we couldn't overcome. That night marked the beginning of a new chapter in our relationship. It was a chapter filled with love, trust, and endless possibilities. And as we drifted off to sleep, I knew that our journey was far from over. There were still many adventures to be had, many fantasies to explore. But this time, we would face them side by side, partners in every sense of the word.